So, why can't we seem to build enough houses in America? It's a huge question. And what if a major trade policy is actually making the whole situation worse? Today, we're going to connect two really big topics, tariffs and the housing shortage, to see what's really going on. Let's dive in.
Okay, first, let's just let this number sink in. 4 million. That is the number of homes the US is short right now. It's a massive deficit, and it's what's driving up prices for literally everyone, whether you're trying to buy or just rent. This isn't some small gap, it's a full-blown nationwide crisis.
With a shortage that big, the obvious question is, why don't we just build more houses? Well, it's not that simple, of course, and a brand new congressional report is pointing its finger at a very specific economic policy as a big part of the problem. And that brings us to the first major piece of our puzzle here, the case against tariffs. A report coming out of the U.S. Congress Joint Economic Committee is making the argument that these trade policies are a key reason construction has been hitting the brakes. So, just so we're all on the same page, what are we talking about? Well, import tariffs are basically just taxes on goods that we bring in from other countries. This report specifically hones in on tariffs that were put in place during the Trump administration, which directly jacked up the cost of a lot of essential construction materials. Things like steel and lumber. And here's the headline number from that report. It estimates that since these tariffs went into effect, the home construction industry has lost nearly 60,000 jobs. I mean, that is a huge claim, suggesting a really direct line between this policy and a shrinking workforce. The logic they're using here is pretty straightforward. The report basically argues that when tariffs make materials more expensive, it just gets harder and more expensive to build anything, and that financial pressure, they say, is what's forcing the industry to cut jobs. And what's really interesting here is you can see just how real these costs are. We're not talking about some abstract economic theory. Key building materials like copper and steel, they're up over 20% in a single year. And it's not just the structure. Even the stuff you put inside the house, like popular ovens, are up 9%. You can see how those numbers add up really fast on a job site. So the bottom line from this report really comes down to this one pretty stark sentence. Their conclusion couldn't be clearer. They believe tariffs aren't just a small issue, they are actively making the national housing crisis even worse. But, as with most big economic questions, it's never that simple, is it? Let's move on because other data, this time from the home building industry itself, starts to paint a much more complicated picture. And this slide just lays out the conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the congressional report claiming that 60,000 jobs vanished. But on the other, you've got data from the National Association of Home Builders, the NAHB, which shows a smaller loss, about 29,000. But here's the real kicker. The NAHB also says there are over 200,000 open jobs in the industry. And that 202,000 number isn't just a drop in the bucket. It's actually a historically high number of job openings. So this suggests the problem isn't just the jobs are being cut, it's also that there's a serious ongoing labor shortage. Builders just can't find the workers they need to fill these spots. So this leads us to a much bigger question. If it's not just about the direct cost of materials from tariffs, what else is going on here? What are the real market movers? Well, according to the NAHB's chief economist, Robert Dietz, one of the biggest factors is something you can't really put a price tag on. It's uncertainty. He argues that the sheer unpredictability that tariffs create has this larger chilling effect on the whole industry. So how does a fuzzy word like uncertainty actually stop a house from being built? Well, it means builders get a lot more cautious. They're way less willing to take big financial risks. And that translates directly into fewer applications for construction permits, and ultimately a drop in the number of new homes that are even started. And then there's the other elephant in the room. According to Joel Berner, a senior economist over at Realtor.com, the single biggest factor driving all of this might not even be tariffs at all. It could be interest rates. Let's just compare these two pressures side by side. Tariffs, they hit the supply side, right? They raise costs and create uncertainty for builders. But interest rates, they're a total double whammy. They raise the cost of borrowing money for the builders themselves, and they hit the demand side by making mortgages way more expensive for all of us. Okay, so we've got tariffs, we've got job numbers, uncertainty, interest rates, all swirling around. This brings us to the most important question of all. Why does any of this actually matter to you and your bank account? Let's connect all the dots. It's really a pretty clear chain reaction when you lay it out. First, all this economic volatility creates uncertainty for builders.
Second, because they're uncertain, they slow down construction. Third, when construction slows, that massive 4 million home shortage we talked about, it doesn't get any better. In fact, it could get worse. And the final step? The prices we all have to pay to either rent or buy a home stay stubbornly, painfully high.
So while one report might point a finger directly at tariffs, the reality is this complex web of interconnected pressures. You've got tariffs, interest rates, a labor shortage, and this general feeling of uncertainty, all squeezing the housing market from different directions. It really leaves us with a final, very difficult question. In a crisis this complicated, where on earth do we even begin to build a solution?